I'm recording. So, okay. All right. So, welcome everyone. This is Dr. Megan,
And this is Joe Smith.
and we have our February episode of the Do Better podcast underway with you all, live recording, live broadcasting. We're super excited to have a guest today who is a member of the Do Better Collective and is going to be talking about one topic that I have found fascinating over the past few years, looking at somatic movement. You might also hear somatic healing, somatic therapy. There's a lot of different words that you'll hear being used, and Iveth is going to talk about that. But before we go into why we're talking about this today and what it like, why as behavior analysts we would even be covering this, my first question to you, Iveth, first of all, feel free to introduce yourself, is what is somatic movement so that everyone understands what we're talking about as we dive in on this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Iveth, and somatic is definitely a buzzword in the wellness industry right now. But I want to break down what it actually means. So the word soma just means relating to the body. So somatic movement is moving in a way where our intention is placed on our internal experiences rather than focusing on our external experience and what the movement actually looks like. Our body holds a lot of wisdom for how to heal and regulate itself, but I feel like we often don't pay attention to it. And I feel like this is just us being trained not to listen to our bodies from a very young age. Like small things, even just like feeling like we have to use the restroom and being told at school, like, oh, no, you can't use the restroom right now, or it's not an appropriate time to eat right now. So we grow up learning how to dismiss these cues from our body. And we might have seen on social media certain somatic movement like rage rituals, shaking, dancing, but somatic movement can be any movement as long as it's being motivated by an internal experience. So I believe something even just like going to the bathroom when you feel that cue is somatic movement.
I love that explanation, and I think, like, how well do you connect with that, Joe? Do you feel like you've experienced that in your everyday life, ignoring your body's signals?
Yeah, I have. There's definitely been times that I just ignore how my body feels and just keep on trucking throughout the day. And then by the end of the day, I'm just so exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yep. And of course, anyone who's watching live, if you want to chime in and share if this is something, I'm very curious because we have so many people on live while we're recording this, for folks to type in the chat if they want to, like, A, are you familiar with somatic movement? And B, does what Yvette just said resonate with you in terms of ignoring the signals of your body? One thing we've talked about quite a bit in the emotional regulation course that I have, and then just in general in the collective, is the idea of interoception and teaching children how to recognize what is happening inside their bodies, and especially from like an emotional experience. And it's so difficult. My son's 8 and we're still working so hard on getting him to realize when he's hungry or he needs to go to the bathroom or he's tired, and then combining that with emotions is like even more of a struggle. And he, as far as I know, in terms of if we were to assess his language and communication and social, all the different skills from a neurotypical development, he would be on track for all of those things. So I look at how difficult it is for him, how difficult it is for me as a 41-year-old, because like you said, it's suppressed so much as we're growing up. And I'm really excited to see that there are people like you who are getting a deeper understanding of it, teaching people like us. But then really, what will the next generation experience when they have more space to understand what's happening in their bodies?
Yeah, I love that you brought up the word interoceptive because I feel like you need to have that interoceptive like awareness of your body in order to know how to move it in a certain way to regulate it. So that's super important. And it's hard, I think, for us as adults because our learning history, our history with ways to cope or suppress it has been a lot longer than our, kids. So it is hard to teach someone something when we're still learning how to do it.
And that is so true. And like yeah. And then for me, like I have never heard of somatic movement. So this is going to be super interesting just to hear you talk about it and to learn more. So I'm super excited. But um, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into focusing on somatic movement?
Yeah, definitely. I'll give a little bit of background as to like my BCBA journey. So I've been in the field since 2018 and I started as an RBT. And 1 month in, I decided I was going to pursue my master's in applied behavior analysis. I just loved the science and loved just the rewarding feeling of teaching children how to say their first words and to learn how to play with others. So in 2020, I became a BCBA. And once I became a BCBA and I had all of these responsibilities, I realized that I was just constantly stressed. So I did all of the typical, meditations, working on my mindset, but I would just come home and just feel anxiety in my body. And I would get really frustrated with myself because I feel like I was doing all of the work, but I still felt anxious in my body. So 4 years go by and I get to a place that I'm just pretty burnt out. And so I decide to take a break from the field. So I go traveling to Southeast Asia for a few months with my partner. And during that time, I decided to dive deeper into my healing practice. So I discovered, nervous system regulation and, a body-based approach to healing, which is something that I hadn't tried before. So I started learning everything that I could about it and did a certification in that. And I realized that that was the missing piece. I didn't know how to release that anxiety from my body because even though I wasn't working, I was on vacation on an island, I still felt that anxiety of like I have all of this responsibility. And I was like, how is this possible? And that was the missing piece to me having that mind and body connection is I could not have the mind and body connection because I was so disconnected from my body. And so that's how I came into the world of somatic movement. And it's something that I use every day now. And it definitely took me a journey to get to the point where I could feel connected with my body and feel those smaller signals that I was starting to become stressed. Because in the past, what I realized now that I was doing wrong is I was only aware when it was already like screaming at me, like I am so anxious. So doing the work has really allowed me to pinpoint those small signals where I'm like, oh, this is like almost like this is a precursor for like when I'm about to get really stressed. So let me go ahead and take some time for myself. Let me do some movement, shake it out before it gets to that point. And I think this is something that we should all know how to do. And I think it would really prevent a lot of burnout in our field.
Thank you so much for sharing that journey with us. I love how open you were to exploring while you were traveling and learning more about the different things that we don't really get as much exposure to, obviously, in like the Western part of the world, but also as a behavior analyst, because a lot of times there's so much control over what we're supposed to be consuming or engaging with. And we're basically instructed to shove everything off to the side that doesn't immediately seem behavior analytic in nature. I'm curious, you kind of already mentioned, and you've been tying in really nicely some of the terms we would use, but generally speaking, obviously, since we have you here, we all probably know the answer, but how would you say the two connect to one another? So looking at what you've learned, not just with somatic movement, but all of the things when you were doing the training and understanding on your travels, to being able to translate that and understand from like a behavior analytic perspective how this all connects together.
Yeah. One, I think, was just having the understanding that emotions drive our behavior. Like so many of us are behaving from fear. We're doing things in order to avoid uncomfortable feelings. I know, and I think that's in the field we focus so much on what's observable, but there's a lot internally that is driving our behavior. So I really like to merge the two because if I can help someone identify what they're feeling in their body before they get to a dysregulated place. Because I think we all know what it looks like when our clients are dysregulated. They hit that emotional threshold, and it's like no intervention is going to work. We have to just teach them how to cope and regulate through that moment in order to get back to teaching. So I think it's super important if we can teach our clients how to regulate their own nervous system before it gets to a dysregulated place, in order to have more opportunities for teaching. And what I do with my clients, because I work with women now, is when they come to me and they have like goals, such as starting their own business or getting on stage to speak, oftentimes, the behavior analyst in me, I can go in and teach shaping, use her motivation, reinforcement, all of that. But if there's like a deep rooted fear of failure or of rejection, that is going to drive her behavior way more. So I need to find a way to help her regulate with that emotion that's going to come up. So that's how I like to merge the two. It's like we need to address those emotions so that they don't, you know, influence our behavior, and so that we can continue to behave in a way that is in alignment towards our values instead of away from our values because we're too scared.
I love that. And I don't even know when you say too scared. I think what you're referring to is like the women that you're helping and how people might be anxious or scared. But I also, what it brings up for me is, as a behavior analyst, if you're too scared to dip your toes outside of this little box that we've been placed into as behavior analysts, like you're worried that it might not be behavior analytic in nature to understand these things, you have to practice based off of your values and see what aligns with the scientific process of behavior analysis and your values as a person. And I've seen a lot of discussion about that lately, people saying like your personal and professional values like are two different things. But I think for many of us, I don't necessarily agree with that. But even so, if you look at our professional values and what would be in the BACB ethics code, everything that you're talking about aligns with all of this, especially from like understanding. I know sometimes people might not picture it this way entirely, but the whole being able to understand, like have cultural humility and understand different cultures, because a lot of the things that people, you know, roll their eyes at or dismiss so easily, it's because it comes from a different culture. And it's not part of like Western medicine and Western science and all of those types of things. So it's immediately like taboo and, oh, that absolutely can't be behavior analytic. And it's like, or you just don't have a good understanding of culture and being open to learning about the different ways that other people have explored understanding behavior.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you brought that up, about having different values in our professional and our work life. And I agree. I think our true values are not different, but going back to when I was working in the clinic setting, I remember feeling that way of like, I feel like I have to show up as one person at work and be all behavior analytic and all of the stuff that I love. And at home, it's like I love to do all of my like spiritual like practices and like self-care. So when I got to a place where I discovered that I love the somatic movement, and nervous system regulation work, I felt a little torn because I was like, how do I possibly combine these? Can I even do this? I haven't seen anyone do it before. And I agree. I think so often we put ourselves in a box because we don't want to, step outside of our practice, what I'm zoning out right now, competency. And we don't want to violate the ethical code in any way. So what I have really learned to work on for myself is being okay with just trying things, and seeing if there's a way that I can tie it to behavior analysis. And I found that I feel like everything that I do, I can, and just having that permission for myself that I'm capable, and it's okay to try something, even if it's not already made.
And I think a lot of
I
people
love that.
are also afraid of the unknown and stepping out what's the norm. And I feel like that is also hindering us from growing as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like and this is the other part of it. I feel like as behavior analysts, we wear so many hats already, and there's so many variables that we have to, take into account when working with our clients and making sure that they're making progress. So sometimes it feels like, oh, this is another thing. But what I really invite, behavior analysts to do is do the work for yourself. Like, see how it's going to help you manage your stress, and in being really connected with your body, how that's going to help you understand your clients' needs a lot better.
And I love that. I love that suggestion of working on ourselves first to really use the skills that you're suggesting, so then we can better serve ourselves first. So then we can also know how we can help our clients better too.
Yes. Doing a lot of the movement on myself, and like when I'm feeling very anxious, I realize that sensation, also knowing where in our body it lives. For me, it's in my hands. I get a tingle and I get a sweating kind of feeling. So I want to do a lot of this, and doing that, I've had a lot of aha moments where I'm like, oh, I see why my clients do this. It feels good. It helps to release some of that anxiety. So it's really, made me even further like understand, or, get more curious about like the type of movement, because I feel like a lot of the children that we work with, I know a lot of us work with children on the spectrum. They're really connected with their bodies, and they know what to do when they feel a physical sensation. And I feel like a lot of the times, we're trained to decrease stereotypy, but really I think we should really get curious as to like, what's that doing for them emotionally?
Yes, I was definitely going to bring that up. I'm so glad you brought that into discussion. Before we talk about the resources that we had in our notes to ask you about, I just wanted to mention there's a few comments in the chat here. So one that was interesting, and I don't know if Camille, you want to talk about this a bit or not, but if you do, feel free. She had a shoulder injury, and she had somatic yoga recommended to her as part of her healing for the injury. And I'm going to put in the chat, based off of that comment, there's a really good, the podcast, it's going to sound weird because it's like something about food, but the actual podcast episode is with the glucose goddess, and she's talking about her experience. Her name's Jessica, but she's talking about her experience with, she had a neck injury, and they did somatic, she did a lot of different Eastern medicine strategies to help with her healing from that trauma. And the episode's really cool because the guy interviewing her is really very hardcore science, data driven, and so is she's a scientist too, but she's clearly more in the very open and curious realm of science and really exploring different strategies, and he's more like never heard of these things. And the conversation, it's so fascinating to listen to because he models being open and curious and letting her share what are the things that worked for her and how did this help. So in case anyone wants additional resources, I know you're about to share some, but I'm going to put that in the chat as well. And then I'll go ahead and throw it over to you. What are some of your favorite resources for learning more about somatic movement?
Yeah, my favorite resources are definitely books and reading more about our bodies and how our bodies hold on to trauma, or even just, store emotions. And if they continue to stay there and we don't address it, they just continue to pile up into what I call like emotional constipation. Like, how many of us have ever like gotten home from like a really stressful day, and it's just like thing after thing after thing, and we end up like just snapping at our partner or whatever it is, and it wasn't the thing that our partner said, it was just the accumulation of all of this, and it's just like needs to come out. So I really enjoy reading books like, I don't know if you've heard of The Body Keeps Score. I feel like that's a really popular one. And the one that I've been recently reading is It Didn't Start with Us. So it's like learning about how even what we're feeling in our body may not even be our direct experience, but things that have been passed down from our, generations. And I think this is something that's super interesting because it makes me think about when we're doing an intake with our clients and asking, about families' history of like, illnesses, and talking about like anxiety and stuff. Like I remember doing like record reviews and seeing like, okay, this family has a history of anxiety, but even just getting curious, like maybe with the parents, asking them like, hey, what makes you anxious? Where do you feel your anxiety in your body? And that may even give us a better idea as to where our clients that are not able to communicate for themselves, what they're feeling in their bodies. And I believe that the best resource is your own body. So if working on connecting with your body, and what that really means is just becoming more aware of these like signals. Like I think kind of our body as a car, like it has like the oil change signals, the maintenance signals. And when they come up, instead of saying, oh no, I don't want to go, I don't want to spend that money, or I'll just push it off till next week, it's like, okay, the signal came up. It's coming up for a reason. It's letting me know that there's something that I need to address. Let me address it now so that it doesn't continue to get to a point where now I have all of these things wrong with my car and now I'm having to spend a lot more money to fix it.
I love the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I haven't read the second one you mentioned, but I'm going to put the link in the chat for everyone for that one as well. For do you have, I know it's probably sounds silly, but do you have any Instagram or like TikTok people? I love watching people model the movements and show what they're doing for things. So I love, I have a couple that I follow, but I never remember their names. I'm scrolling, I'm like, oh, that's really good.
Yeah, I can't think of any from the top of my head, but I do have an Instagram account where I talk about applying ABA and women's health, wellness, and empowerment. So that's more of like what I do with my coaching. And then I do have a new Instagram page that I just started called Emotion Aware ABA. And that's where I plan to go in and really talk a lot more and do more education on, movement and how we can use this with our clients in order to help them make more progress. But I can send those over to you if you want me to.
Yes, I'll put those in the chat too. So Joe, your question is up next. We think we've talked about it a little bit, but we'll go ahead and do it and see if we didn't get to everything yet.
Yeah, I know you discussed a little bit about how you incorporate somatic movement into your practice as a behavior analyst, but can you go in more in detail of like how you incorporate it?
Yes, definitely. So I'm using this work in two different areas. So I'll talk about the first area first, about what I do as a coach working with women. So when, and it's very similar to just like a regular intake, but, usually it starts off with me asking what their goals are, what they've tried, what they haven't. And what I assess is if it's a can't do or a won't do. So just for example, like she wants to go up on stage or have a TED Talk. Let's just say that. She wants to go and present at a TED Talk. And so then I assess, is it a can't do or a won't do? Does she just not know the steps how to get there? If that's the case, then I can go in and, we can teach, the preparation and all of the skills in order to get there. But if it's a won't do, to me, I assess that when I see that she knows how to do the thing, she knows what to do, but the fear, or, there's a feeling in her body that's telling her not to do that. It's like I teach her how to cope with that. So that's when I go in and I teach her to connect with her body, really understand what she's feeling and why, and then teach her some coping tools through movement so that she can move and release that and think from a place of more clarity in order to take action on that goal of hers. And then the other area that I'm applying this is in, a setting with children with autism. So in this area, what I would do is, let's just take an example of maybe someone that is, having like prolonged tantrums. And with this work, I would get really curious about like what is going on in their bodies, what are they feeling, and how are they moving? Because I've had experiences with, you know, my clients when they're in a tantrum, they're moving, right? They're moving their hands like this, or they're kicking their feet. So what I would really get curious about is just what are they feeling in their bodies? And instead of focusing on like the function of like maybe they wanted the iPad, and me going in and saying like, okay, you know, like function based, like let's ask for the iPad. I feel like asking for the iPad doesn't address what he's feeling in his body. And so that's where I would go in and, you know, maybe I think this is all about experimenting, because every body is different and every body needs a different type of movement. But maybe when, you know, he's in a neutral place, really experimenting with what types of movements he likes. And if we're seeing a lot of movement in the hands, I always like to go back to the body map, because there's this map where it'll tell you where we often feel certain emotions in our bodies. So kind of referencing that and like, okay, what emotion do people often feel in their hands? Because I'm noticing that my client is moving their hands a lot. And then that kind of helps to give me an idea of like, okay, what are the type of coping skills that I should be teaching in order to, one, prevent tantrums, and then two, have them not be so prolonged so that we can get more teaching in.
Love it. I love that. You really step back a little bit and really analyze like what is going on with that individual, and really see, and really like a really fine point, just like view of like what they're doing with the body, and really and use that to think of ways to help the client, which I love.
Yeah, definitely, because in that priority, you know, in that instance, my priority is just helping them cope. And what's really helped me again is like doing the work on my own, and having a lot more compassion. Like, oh man, I know what it feels like when it feels like you can't have what you want. And it's so frustrating. You're doing everything that you can. And in that case, you know, it's a lot more about just helping them cope. Another situation that I thought of was, you know, I used to have a client, and, you know, she would be in the clinic setting, and then maybe right around 12, I, she would start to walk towards the door and wanted to leave. And it was really hard to, you know, explain to her, like, oh, mom's not coming for another 2 hours. And she would, you know, have a meltdown because she was so upset. And in that case, you know, I think typically we would redirect. But what I would do in those instances is I would put myself in her shoes, like, oh man, how distressing must that feel, to feel like you want your mom, you want that comfort, and you can't have it. Like your body is telling you, I need that. So what I would do in that case is I would just hold her. And that helped so much to just regulate her and give her that connection that she needed. And then we were able to get back to teaching, versus if we just, you know, continued through and, you know, try to redirect her, like that was a lot more just stressing on her body. So that's another example of how I really like to pay attention to what my client just may need and what their body may be telling them, so that I can just give them that comfort.
It's so, I know you've mentioned this a few times and we've already acknowledged it, but I just want to reiterate the point of doing the work for yourself, because so many of us don't even like, we're just like almost robotically going through our days. And like we've all talked about this already. If you're someone listening right now and you haven't started that journey of trying to connect to your body and feel and really feel things, please do, because you will be a better behavior analyst when you do that. You will have so many more variables that you're thinking about and wanting to assess and understand with each of your clients. The more you experience that connection that that's talking about, it's mind blowing. For me, it didn't start until probably like my late 30s, early 40s. And well, I'm only 41, so I'm still there in the early 40s range. But like to even have that concept of anything with recognizing what's going on, and I still have a really hard time with it. One of my friends is like super connected to his body, like maybe almost too much. I don't know if that's possible, but like he'll be like, my body's buzzing right now, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like he's like, I can feel all this stuff in my body, and I'm like, okay. I've never felt that way before, that's just how disconnected I am from my body. But there's so much responding and behavior I engage in automatically without realizing it's all being influenced by what's going on inside my body. And the more I can take that in, then I can teach my son about it. I can teach my clients about it. It's so fascinating. And again, it's so wild to me that it's such an ignored part. Like I was just thinking about this the other day. My son has homework, right? And because he has homework, I don't have as much time to work with him on the things he needs to be working on, like emotional regulation and understanding his body. I'm like, wouldn't it be nice if instead of having to do math and reading at home, we could have that kind of homework? Or even at school, if they were working more on social emotional learning, because guess what? Anyone can learn math and reading online now, pretty much. Not everyone, but there should be so much more done to assess and really comprehensively help humans with that full human experience of being a human, not just the things that we've been conditioned for so long by society to think are important.
Definitely everything that you said. And when we get to the place where we really feel like what our bodies are feeling, it's uncomfortable. I remember when I first started the work, I didn't want to do it. I would try to sit with whatever feeling I was feeling. And like a lot of it was anxiety. And I would just try to breathe through it. But I felt like I was going to drown. Like it was so overwhelming. And I think once you're able to get over that hump, there's so much release that needs to come out that I think we just like inhibit because one, we think it's not like socially appropriate, like whatever our bodies need to do. Like I remember I just felt this urge to scream and I didn't know why. And I even saw like a spiritual counselor and I told her like, I just have this feeling like I need to scream. She walked me through this kind of like somatic practice and I was just even like shy to even move or be loud. But like doing the work and getting more comfortable, I realized like, oh, okay, I was been suppressing what my body just naturally was telling me needed to do. And just randomly sometimes like when I'm feeling really stressed, that's just how my body likes to release it, is in a scream or really throwing things. Like that's how my body likes to release it. So I live in an apartment, so it's not like appropriate probably to scream. I'll probably freak out my neighbors. So I'll just go in my car and drive on the highway and just scream and let it out. So I think there's ways that we can do it without, scaring other people.
I love that so much. Well, I think we just have like one question left from, well, main question, and then we'll see if anyone that's watching has any questions. I kind of already mentioned this, but I've been consuming quite a few things relating to somatic healing and movement. Mostly mine is like podcasts. I already linked the one that I was telling you all about. There's some IG accounts, but I never remember what they are. But there's even some really good TED Talks if people are wanting to learn more about somatic movement and healing, somatic therapy. If you Google, you'll find quite a few things. The hard part is like we talked about at the beginning, it is a buzzword right now. So some of the things you find might not be super helpful. And I've tried to stay away from anything that's behind like a paywall right now, because I don't know if people are just trying to take my money. So I try to see, not that I don't want to pay people to learn about it, but until I find like a reputable source, then I say, okay, then I'll pay for that. But I'm a person who definitely, I experience very strong urges to physically move when I'm distressed. And these resources have helped a ton. And doing some of these exercises, as an antecedent, like preventative, just and part of my daily routine has really helped a lot as well. So this is more, it's not really a question fully, but it's more just an opportunity for us to discuss. We've mentioned it a little bit, but thinking about the role our bodies play in our behavior and how this isn't talked about enough within our field, and how much, like with my clients, especially, I've seen like there's this one, I've talked about this a few times on here, but there's this one workout I've done on Daily that's it's not advertised as somatic movement, but it really feels like that's where the person pulled from. And there's this breathing thing in there where you like breathe in twice and then you breathe out, but it's like this like big movement. So you breathe in twice and then you do this like axe throwing type thing down to the ground. And man, after I do like 4 or 5 of those, it's so good. And I'm just like, why are we not learning about these? And we talk about replacement behaviors and we talk about helping our clients build skills. but there's this whole area that many of us are missing out on, whether we learn about it for ourselves or collaborate with others who know about these things, that if we were helping to train and explicitly teach our clients, like, hey, here's some ways that you can like move this energy out of your body. And I know it doesn't sound very behavior analytic to say it, but I legit can feel it, even though I don't feel very connected to the ongoings in my body, that like whatever building up, that like tension, I see it, it's called energy usually, but I know a lot of behavior analysts will be like, there's no energy. But there's something, there's an urge, there's something happening. And if I don't release it somehow, we're going to have problems. I will yell at people. I know it sounds weird because you all don't see me in that way, but like my loved ones get to experience when I'm not controlling and like addressing these things, I will have like a mad mommy moment or something like that, you know? So, I just wanted to kind of like feel free for folks listening. And then of course, Joe and Iveth, if you want to chime in on like, what are some things we could maybe start doing to help incorporate this more with the work that we do as behavior analysts?
Yeah, I think I brought this up before, but definitely just like acknowledging that our emotions do affect our behavior. And I know that emotions can, sometimes emotions and feelings like already like behavior analysts can kind of like, turn their back and say, oh no, I don't want to talk about that. But I really feel like emotions are just physical sensations. Like when we talk about sadness and anger, where do you feel that in your body? It's like, it's a physical sensation. Like anger is usually like a heat. It's this like overwhelming feeling, and oftentimes that can kind of lead us to a place where we just lose inhibition of whatever behavior we're inhibiting, and then we just lash out. So when we think about it that way, where it's just physical sensations, and if we can teach our clients to identify that, right? We teach them how to identify something that's hot and cold. Why can't we teach them to identify when their own body feels hot and cold? And then teach them, hey, this means, maybe you're feeling a little angry right now. These are the movements that you can do to help move that out of your body, or regulate, in order so you can finish this homework assignment. Like I to me, I can't even see it as it's not behavioral anymore. Like it just makes sense to me.
Yes. Joe, do you have any thoughts to add?
I think this right now, this talk is really powerful right now, because for me, I haven't been experiencing so much more emotions more in my career now than I have when I first started. And I'm not sure if that's just because all the extra responsibilities, or what's going on in the world, or just becoming a dad. Like it's like there is so much more now. Like I'm like, whoa, where is this coming from? Because I never experienced it. So like this is something I'm going to take back, and I'm going to definitely um practice and just use on my own, just to see how it helps me. But I see this as a really another tool that we can definitely use um, in our everyday life, and also how we might be able to help with our own clients with this, and utilize this. So, um, like I said, I never heard in my career ever somatic movement before, and this is the first time, and I'm loving listening to Iveth talk about how she utilizes this. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that you all are enjoying this and that it's resonating. And what it made me think of, because Joe, I think you were working in the classrooms, right, for a while, or yeah,
Yeah.
just, or even just at the beginning of our sessions, is just having our clients come in and maybe doing some movement so that they can shake off whatever it is that they came in. Maybe their parents told them no to a Happy Meal, and that can sometimes like really make our clients upset. So if we can just guide them through, like maybe just playing a song where they can just like shake out their wiggles or shake out whatever it is that they're feeling in their bodies before getting to a place where we're teaching them, I feel like we're going to have a lot more success than having to, or one, like not having the awareness that that's what they may be feeling, and then, having them push through when they're feeling these feelings in their body, like I just need to erupt. And I think that's why oftentimes we'll see our clients just get upset, and we'll take our ABC data and say, oh, it was because of, this happened right before, so that must be, the antecedent. But I would get really curious about, like, I think sometimes whatever happened right before the behavior isn't the actual cause. It was just a buildup of whatever happened throughout the day. And that little thing was like the last straw.
Yes. Um, okay, so we have a few minutes left. I just put another link in the chat. I don't know. Have you seen this one yet? GoZen.com. So this I just started with Taylor, as I mentioned, trying to work still on emotional regulation and all of the things. And it's really good. It's so funny because I've mentioned for a while that like I would love if there could be better engaging resources that are aligned with like ACT and all of these things that we're talking about today for kids, because he just turned 8. So a lot of the stuff that's out there is more for like teens and adults, that's interactive and online and that kind of thing. So I've been following this page for a while, and I was like, all right, I'm finally going to spend the money and check it out. And it's really, really interesting. They have short little video clips, and it's 2 characters that they're following. We're doing the anger one right now. And they're kind of going through a lot of what we talked about today, where they're doing first just recognizing that like anger is a thing, and like this is how it feels in your body, and it's okay. And I loved it. Like, if anyone who's ever attended an ACT training, they talk about how all emotions are valid and acceptable, and there's no negative emotion, and the evolutionary existence of emotions and all of that stuff. I'm like, how do you explain that to an 8-year-old? But they did, and it's amazing. Like, they do such a great job with it. So I'm loving it so much. So for folks who are kind of wondering if how you might incorporate some of this, besides following the Instagram pages that Iveth just put in, feel free to learn more, because I know we're going to learn so much more from you. And I love this combination of behavior analysis and somatic movement. There's resources that exist like GoZen, and there's a few others. I have like a whole Google Doc on social emotional resources that I can share as well. But anyway, before we close out, I wanted to see if anyone that's on here right now watching the podcast has any questions or comments that they wanted to share. I know we've had quite an active chat. It's been hard to like do both things. So does anyone want to share, have questions for Iveth before we have our last question for her?
Yeah, I'd love to hear if anybody has any questions about how they can start the work on their own, or if you're already using something like this in your practice, and now like the dots are being connected of like, oh, that's, I actually do use some of this without knowing it.
This is
You're more than
Camille.
welcome.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for bringing this to light, putting it together. One of the things that I put in the chat, I've been in the field for 30 years, and pretty much the messages that I feel like either directly or indirectly along the line, I was given this very clear message that there are these 2 hats that you wear, and do not let that other hat come into our field. So there was this feeling like I had to say out loud, well, this is my spiritual hat, or this is my mommy emotional hat. And I love the fact that we're starting to bring this communication out, because that's asking us to be split. We're trying to make other people whole when we're telling each other that we have to separate ourselves into different halves, which we can't be whole and do that. So I'm just so grateful for this talk, and I'm so grateful, Megan, always for, that's why we're doing better. And I'm grateful that I was able to join today. So thank you for bringing this out. I've already pulled up your Instagram, and I'm going to reach out to you a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Camille. And I feel like what you brought up is super important, of us just wearing these 2 hats. And I believe that this, really is the root of a lot of our stress, is being one person in one setting, right? So like for me, being the behavior analyst and inhibiting all of these things that sometimes I just felt like my intuition, I'm like, my client needs this. I don't have data, but I need to find a way to create data. But in the moment, my client needs this for me and I just know it. So I think it's super important, and of like, for us just as humans, being able to be our full expression of ourselves wherever it is that we are. And for, the behavior analysts that feel like, this does not belong in our field, I really have compassion, because it is scary. It is scary to, bring something in that we have been told is not part of, what we do. And I think a lot of it comes from fear, because if we are no longer the experts in what we do, and now we're incorporating all of these things, and that's scary, and that can introduce a lot of like, self-doubt and insecurity. So I believe that it comes from a place of fear of like, I don't want to not feel in control. But I love that we're having these conversations. Yeah, what Rosie said, we're like complex beings with so many learning histories, definitely. A lot of emotional learning histories.
Yes. Yes. And thank you. Jenna Lee said, thank you for reminding us that compassion belongs here. I'm very committed to being open and curious and taking people's perspectives, but sometimes it becomes really hard when it's like the people who are dug in on the like old way of doing things. And I'm just like, it's hard to be compassionate about that. So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, definitely. And I did not have this like understanding even just a year ago. I would definitely get like irritated of like, we should talk about these things. But going through my own experiences and really feeling what fear feels like for me, and what I feel like when I'm out of control, and how dysregulating that is for me, has helped me have a lot more compassion for people of like, oh yeah, I know how that feels and that doesn't feel good. But again, it doesn't excuse behavior. I feel like we do need to do better, and accept that we don't know everything, and we do need to pull from other fields to get a better understanding of who we are, like overall, because we are complex humans.
I love it. Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions before Joe asks the final question and we close out for today? Feel free to come on the microphone or type in the chat. All right, I don't see anyone unmuting. So Joe, we'll have you ask the question, and then, oh, we have a couple of comments. Let's see. Leslie said, Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life is a good book to do your own reflection. And Rosie said, we can be compassionate towards the humans who disagree, but we don't have to condone. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and Steve Hayes, great resource for learning more about ACT. And if anyone is listening to this and you're wondering about emotion, and we're even taking it a step further, obviously, with this understanding of like your body and emotion and behavior and bringing all of that together. We've talked about that quite a bit in a lot of the content we cover in the collective. But one of my favorite articles is from Steve Hayes. It's not really an article, it's his presidential address from many years ago on the third wave of behaviorism. So if you haven't read that before, I highly recommend checking it out, because he does a really good job of explaining how all of these things tie in with behavior analysis, and it all does link together, and we don't have to push these other fields and areas of study aside. We can bring them, synthesize them all together, and still be practicing as good behavior analysts. So all right, Joe, go ahead and ask the last question.
All right, so I know we talk a lot about somatic movement, but is there anything else that we need to discuss? Or, you know what, as for me, I would love to know, what is the first step for a behavior analyst who is curious about utilizing somatic movement, just for myself? What would be that first step I need to take in order to start this journey?
Yeah, the first one is like, I would definitely start by just like ask or just assessing like, what is an emotion or physical sensation that I'm feeling often, And with what you said, what your life looks like right now, I'm assuming like maybe there's like overwhelm sometimes. And I think this is super important for me. I love to talk about this layer is like, you know, there's like the expectations for women and expectations for men. And in working with men, what I notice is a lot of times, you know, men feel like they have to inhibit their emotions because it's not socially acceptable to one, talk about them, and then two, you feel the pressure to have everything like, you know, hold everything down, that there's no room for your emotions. So I believe it's super important to have that discussion as well. And then really just like analyzing like, okay, what am I feeling in my body? And then, you know, going down the rabbit hole of like, what are different movements? And then, you know, for women as well, I feel like oftentimes we're told that we're too emotional. So then we start to inhibit how we actually feel, or, you know, talk about um, certain topics. So I feel like that's a very important layer that I would love to add is like, just what's our history with, you know, with like just our background. And even just like culture is a whole other layer as well. Like, what does our culture tell us about talking about our feelings and all of that? So definitely just getting curious and learning more about how does my family address emotions, and then that I think for me gives the biggest insight as to like, okay, having that awareness of like, okay, this is how my family has taught me to deal with emotions. This is how I'm doing it. What are emotions that I'm inhibiting, and how is that affecting me in my day to day? And then what are ways that I can take that control back and be able to express, you know, whatever it is that I'm feeling in a way that, so that I'm not holding it in and that just feels good. Does that make sense? I know I
Yes,
just talked about a
yeah,
whole lot of things, so.
that does.
Thank you so much. I love that we have the starting place. And of course, with anything we do, starting with ourselves is the best way to understand it for use with your clients or other aspects of your life. So thank you for that wonderful description. There was one other comment in the chat that I'm just going to mention that folks were sharing. If you haven't seen the latest article, well, not latest, but a recent article that just came out called compassion as the eighth dimension of behavior analysis, that might be a helpful one to check out too for folks that are wanting to learn more about the types of things that we're talking about in this podcast today. So, all right. Any other comments or questions before we finish for today? Anyone want to see a CE on this event, this type of content? Yes. All right. Maybe we can get something put together. Jenna Lee said maybe a cohort. So I'll have to follow up with you after and see what you want to do.
I would love to. I love talking about this. And like I said, I am also applying ABA in women's health, wellness, and empowerment. So there's like so much that I'm doing with applied behavior analysis that I feel like we need to. And I'm just so excited to talk about this. So if anybody has any questions, please reach out to me on my Instagram. I love talking about this stuff, and I would love to get a better idea of the questions that you have, so that can give me a better idea of like what are the type of like, you know, content that I should be producing as well.
Wonderful. Joe, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, like I just really appreciate Iveth for you coming out and talking about this topic, and you know, sharing us your wealth of knowledge, and also diving deep into how you stumble upon this and incorporate this into your everyday life and your practice. So thank you.
And we will put the IG, it's Empower with Iveth, and then there's the emotion one too.
Emotion aware.
I need to
ABA.
memorize them. emotion aware ABA. I'll like have it memorized soon, but we'll have those in the show notes for anyone that's listening after our recording. Definitely go give Iveth a follow. And as you mentioned, knowing the questions people have will be really helpful, because again, this is such important information, not only for us to have to heal and grow ourselves, but also then to make use with our clients as appropriate, and synthesizing the work we do with behavior analysis. I am beyond grateful that we had the opportunity to learn from you today in just this 1 hour podcast recording. We definitely want to do more with you and keep learning.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun, and I appreciate all of the questions and just being open to having this discussion. And I just look forward to more collaborations.
Excellent. All right, Joe, you want to close us out?
Yeah, so, all right. So as you know, we're all going to go ahead and go forth and do better.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.